Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. It is Tuesday, July 28th, 2026. Time to get started on our next show. It's Tuesday. The decks are clear for, I don't know, for whatever the hell it is we managed to pack into the next 2 hours. We've got catch-up work to do. We've got big picture work to do. We've got small bore fun story things to do. We've got it all. What order will it come in? I don't know. I'm here to find out just as surely as you are. And so, I don't know, I guess we should begin. Oh, first of all, I think I need to pause and wind back the clock to yesterday. And I guess those of you in Minnesota or probably, and elsewhere, like who read newspapers and things like that, were probably shouting at the radio yesterday. And I'm surprised I don't have, well, maybe I do. I don't have the wrong, I don't have the business end of the email box open yet, but maybe people have chimed in on this. Yesterday, in following up on Greg's mention of the Senate race between Angie Craig, the woman with the two names of the fun online lists, that is the only way I can remember her, and Flanagan, Peggy Flanagan. I was mistaken in thinking, because I don't know anything about this particular race, that I guess Greg described Penny Flanagan correctly as lieutenant governor, and that as between the two of them now running for Senate, there was, they're in a primary debating one another, and that Flanagan was perhaps to be understood as the more progressive, and Angie Craig a more moderate approach to things. And I think I understood it to be Flanagan in elective office currently and Craig not, and running as sort of an outsider, and that it was a weird, for these times, an unusual combination of, I don't know what, a combination of factors for somebody to be running as an insurgent outsider, but from a more moderate position. Well, it didn't make any sense to me, and it shouldn't have, because she's not that. She's a current U.S. representative, which, there's 435 of them. It's no New Hampshire, but it's hard to keep track of a bunch of them. Usually I have a reasonably good handle on the names of the members of the current Democratic House caucus. I've usually heard everyone's name once or twice. We follow their primaries. Greg tells us what's going on. We, hear from them in their committee work every once in a while. Not everybody is a household name, but I'm usually fooled by Republican members of the House, backbenchers who you never hear from, because I'm not usually wading into their politics as much as with Democrats. But here, I'm surprised, given how ridiculous I find the name Angie Craig. There's nothing wrong with it. Nothing wrong with her, I'm sure, and nothing wrong with the names. It just strikes me as funny. But worse still, it strikes me as rather stupid not to have realized that we were talking about an incumbent congresswoman and the incumbent lieutenant governor in this race. So that must have driven you crazy if you're listening from Minnesota. And maybe you haven't listened to yesterday's episode yet. Nothing will now prevent you from experiencing that outrage, but you would be entitled to it. And all right, but know that if you are if you're thinking, I'm going to email him right after I listen to today's podcast, well, that'll solve the problem. Okay. So very good. And my quick review of the early morning incoming mail does not reveal anybody shouting about that, and maybe everybody just understood. Or maybe you live in Minnesota and said, what, who? That could be. It happens. All right. Lots of other things happening today. We'll get to some portion of them. I think when we visit with Greg again tomorrow, there were a couple of debates in some of these contests, and including, if I'm reading correctly, won yesterday between the two aforementioned candidates. Was it yesterday? I'm looking at MPR News, Minnesota Public Radio. Yeah, Angie Craig, Peggy Flanagan spar over fraud, immigration in the U.S. Senate debate. Is that dated where's the date line on this thing? Updated yesterday, so I guess they must have debated over the weekend. So, okay, but I believe we had a Haley Stevens debate with El Sayed, and that I didn't see any of the debate, but I did see people passing around, I guess, snap polls about who won the debate, and it looked rather lopsided, and I guess Haley Stevens' fans, anyway, did not give a good account of themselves in the poll, if not Haley Stevens not giving a great account of herself in the debate as well. So we'll catch up on those things, I think, possibly with Greg. He'll probably be watching the polls and the numbers, and today, other things. And we'll dive into Instapaper to grab a few of them. Here, where shall I begin? I'll begin with this. I told you yesterday that Scott had been sending me a couple of articles. Scott, there's no reason to stop, of course, just because we love shouting your name, about flock cameras and the growing backlash against them. And I've also seen an article circulated today that I guess is related. I have one from The Guardian, but I guess it's about, it's the U.S. side of things, the U.S. Guardian, or at least U.S. coverage. And then there was similar coverage from The Guardian today that I didn't set aside for discussion today because it was UK focused, and I don't know whether flock branded cameras are what's at issue there, but maybe I should go and try and dig it up. But it was about surveillance cameras, like light post mounted surveillance cameras in the UK. So I'll see if I can find it later on. I'll try and find it now while I'm working and reading you the other stories. But let's see. It was not that long ago, so I think I should be able to dig it up. But, well, lots of people are talking about surveillance issues, so that's not really the search term you want to use to try to find this thing. And I guess it could have been reposted to my feed from some hours ago. But here in the United States, I don't know, this seemed like a thematic thing, and that we maybe needed to give a little bit more time to it, and there's a few places that'll afford you more time to do it than right at the beginning of the segment. So let's just go to it, and let me see, I think I have at least two pieces here from Scott about it, and at least one of them was automotive-based in its in its reporting, and it wasn't Jalopnik, so it's a lot of automotive reading going on, I guess, for Scott, and it's a great illustration of the overlap of the everyday and the politics. Everything is political, and lots of people try to separate them, but if you're paying attention from 50,000 feet, I think it's impossible to do. Here's the automotive-focused one from The Truth About Cars, which I've been wondering what it was the whole time. The truth is they are, in fact, anthropomorphic, and they have their own society, and it is the capital of it is Radiator Springs, and it is just as it was presented in the Pixar film. So there you go. Other truth, though, being presented here in an opinion piece by Matt Poskey, which is titled "Automotive Privacy Has Become a Dismal Prospect," which is too bad. I mean, not too bad like you have to suffer with it, but it sounds terrible. But I hadn't thought of things in automotive privacy mode, I guess. So it's an interesting way of putting it. But if you're talking to the Truth About Cars audience, you're gonna have to put it that way. All right. Well, some interesting sidebars here at the Truth About Cars website, but focusing on this one, privacy has become a major concern for people as modern technologies continue growing more invasive. Generally true, right? Nowhere is this more apparent. Oh, Okay, so this is why it's making the news. Nowhere is this more apparent than within the automotive realm, except in the UK, pretty much all the other realms as well. And I think for a lot of us, you could dispute that, but you won't get any fight about that at the Truth About Cars, is what I'm saying. All right. So nowhere is this more apparent to automotive readers than the automotive realm, as driver monitoring systems and roadside surveillance have been largely normalized. There are now an estimated 100,000 flock cameras, and if you don't know about them, I don't know that much about them either, except I kept seeing them be reported as the subject of much concern. Flock, as in flock of seagulls, for instance. 100,000 flock cameras apparently out there, which are automatic license plate readers. That's what I thought, yeah. Now active in the United States, up from just a few hundred in 2020. So they are ramping things up. The network has proved incredibly controversial with the public and only appears to be getting more so over time. America is likewise poised to require all new models to include driver monitoring systems after 2026, something Europe already does. Is this one of those things that you usually see on the trucks? Like, how's my driving? Call 1-800 something? Or is this the, I guess, is the onboard computers? Doesn't one of the insurance companies offer discounts if you'll hook one of those things up and let them monitor how you drive? I guess that's coming for everybody. Involuntarily. Many institutes have similarly moved to require these systems for automobiles to receive top safety accreditations. Insurance groups have likewise been lobbying for their implementation, claiming that they would save countless lives, or dollars. But drivers have found them to be overbearing, annoying, and an affront to what remaining privacy they had left inside their vehicles. And I can see that. I don't even like how I've turned off my lane departure warning. I just don't want to be beeped at, much less actually monitored. But yeah, I guess that's coming too. With public criticism falling upon deaf ears, what are regular people actually supposed to do about it? Ideally, the solution would be to petition the government and pressure the relevant companies not to use these invasive systems, but those complaints are being ignored, and civilians are already starting to take matters into their own hands. Aftermarket companies are already selling OEM-looking covers for driver monitoring cameras and are likewise developing software to help owners modify vehicles via the OBD, what is it, OBDII, or is it OBD2? I can't tell whether that's Roman numerals or not. OBDII port. Okay, so already running into the automotive terminology. I'll Google it. Although I was just recently informed that the kids don't say Google it. So, I mean, by the time you hear that I'm going to look this up on my own with a 15-second delay, Scott, you probably already sent me the answer if you're at the desk and at the keyboard. Yeah, okay. Oh, it is a Roman numeral. Look at that. OBD is onboard diagnostics. The two I's at the end are, in fact, Roman numerals for second generation. According to AI. I mean, who knows? That may have got that one wrong. But OBD, onboard diagnostics, that makes sense, certainly. And what driver monitoring cameras, is that to see if you're falling asleep or distracted or something so they can blame the accident on you instead of coming to your aid? Okay, terrific. That I can see why that's annoying. And OEM, original equipment manufacturer, looking cover. So it's an aftermarket thing, but it looks like an integrated part of your lovely car interior that you paid, so much to have. So, at least it's nice looking and helping cover up the cameras. Okay. Let's see. Representative Thomas Massie, oh boy, of Kentucky, not long for this congressional world, I guess. Anyway, although, if he's following in the footsteps of other high-ranking politicians, federal politicians from Kentucky, maybe not long for this world at all. Anyway, he's a younger man. Massie has been extremely critical of flock cameras. Yes, and there's lots of great puns you can make, I can see already, by naming yourself Flock. And he's previously attempted to defund federal mandates. Defund! Wow, don't tell Greg. He's going to oppose. It's not hard to oppose Thomas Massie on things. but defund federal mandates requiring automakers to install driver monitoring systems. And he said previously that the only option left for civilians was mass noncompliance. So people will be tearing those things out. President Thomas Massie will later be issuing pardons for people who were arrested just for fixing their cars. You'll get the idea. Massie framed the monitoring devices, which are slated to go into all new vehicles sold in the U.S. starting next year. So, off my plate for the next 15 years because there's no new vehicles coming my way. But that characterized as grotesquely invasive and a clear violation of America's Fourth and Fifth Amendment rights. And I said America's, but, I meant Americans. He stated they were tantamount to kill switches and a blatant affront to liberty. But he failed to get enough congressional support to block their implementation. Well, obviously, you're not going to get any support for blatant affronts to liberty in Congress. What are you thinking? Having since lost to Ed Galbraith, I forgot the name of the guy who won that. All I remember is that he lost his primary. But having since lost to Ed Galbraith in what was the most expensive House primary in U.S. history, Kentucky, wow. Massie has taken upon himself to issue warnings about a forthcoming surveillance state and criticize what he sees as a lack of genuine representation of the American people. Fair enough. However, what does noncompliance look like when the system will presumably become default equipment in tomorrow's automobiles? That does sound like it poses a challenge. And indeed, what does noncompliance look like when you're covering up the cameras that actually will tell you what it looks like? That likely depends on how they're implemented. Odds are good that they'll be roughly the same as the units we've already seen be mandated within Europe, which are effectively no different than the dashboard-mounted IR cameras used in most new automobiles equipped with hands-free driving features. In-cabin cameras can easily be covered with some thick tape or destroyed if you're not worried about the resale value of your vehicle, although some would say that would increase it. But the presumption is that this could result in future vehicles disabling themselves. In fact, some European models may not even start unless the camera can do a preliminary facial scan upon startup. I guess that's anti-theft, is probably how it's being billed, but okay. That does sound troublesome. And also, who knows what stupid bugs are in this thing. I guess it'll only a matter of time before we find out the cars won't start for black people, either because the manufacturer thinks, this must be a theft, which I could see happening, or more realistically, I think, just plain facial recognition software doesn't deal well with the darker skin. We've seen it happen already, but an Elon Musk car could certainly assume that there couldn't be a legitimate black driver of this vehicle. And really, honestly, there shouldn't be. So, it's not that he's not wrong about it being unusual that black people would say, I should buy a racist's car, like an old school South African apartheid racist, and buy cars from him. But, they may have bought it used, I don't know, or they have the sticker on there that says, I bought this before Elon went crazy. But also, he's a South Africa racist, and he might be doing it for entirely different racist reasons. We've seen that the cameras are mainly issuing a slew of warning chimes whenever the driver glances anywhere but straight ahead. I'm going to want to turn that off. Interfaces with the touch screen, or the computer decides you look a little sleepy. Well, that's constantly going to be going off for me. And that's when they're working properly. Testing in countries where the systems haven't been mandated has shown that they can be disabled in select vehicles by navigating through menu screens or by simply covering up the camera itself. Oftentimes, the car will just assume the device is broken and will typically limit access to select ADAS features. Oh dear. Okay, you tell me. Such as hands-free driving, while being otherwise fully functional. We're going to skip the terminology on this one and just assume you know what they're talking about. Although this is a slightly different bent than I thought we were going to be covering with the flock cameras. Anyway, but this is interesting. It's all related. That said, we don't know if that will remain the case as the years roll on, and making those kinds of modifications may even be considered a criminal offense, depending on your own regional laws. Trump will pardon you if you're Trumpy enough, I guess. It also doesn't address other privacy concerns like the potential connected vehicles listening to drivers via interior microphones, often used for AI assistance and phone pairing. For that, drivers would effectively need to disable all connectivity services or physically disconnect the relevant physical connection that makes them operational if they want to be extra sure. You don't want anybody hearing your car karaoke tunes, right? Outside of hacking your own vehicle, which is something you can absolutely do, unless you're arrested for it, there aren't a lot of moderate options. Still, this would require businesses or particularly industrious individuals to develop the applicable software for individual models and for the laws to accommodate their continued existence. The latter takes time, and the former may be a major obstacle moving forward. As we know, the industry has been strongly opposed to right-to-repair issues. Hacking your own car would also open up unpaid access to already installed features that auto brands now want customers to pay subscriptions for. Oh, yes, another problematic issue. This could perhaps invite legal battles where manufacturers claim users are stealing from them by installing equipment that was already equipped to a product that the same person paid tens of thousands of dollars to own. I guess hacking your way into, let's say, satellite radio and the like, or map systems, or other things that they would otherwise charge you monthly for. Then we have exterior cameras, which are now common in every new automobile that's available. While essential for many driver assistance features, exterior sensor arrays harvest an almost unfathomable amount of data for automakers and whatever third party ends up buying it from them. China, of all places, China even banned some foreign-made automobiles from entering military bases for this very reason. Okay. Moving on to, got to get past past whatever frog is in my throat here, and then past some advertising material. It's fair to say that much of the above will be viewed as paranoid by some, sure, especially if we assume that everything takes place under the worst case scenario. But this doesn't make the relevant equipment any less annoying to deal with today, nor does it negate the premise that they're still poised to invade the privacy of millions of drivers around the globe. I think that's likely true. I guess you could see that happening even with the external cameras, right? You know, people, I guess it's probably great for high-tech law enforcement, although, you know, how amenable local cops are to making use of that kind of high-tech, I don't know. But it makes for good FBI and CSI type television shows that you can now track criminal activity by harvesting the external camera data of every Tesla and other self-parking car that's out there. If you identify a crime scene and can get all sorts of camera angles and even audio from the street, so I guess do your plotting in Faraday cages if you're going to be if you think you're going to end up on NCIS New Orleans for murdering naval personnel, or opt not to murder the naval personnel. That will be in the first instance a way out. Anyway, yes, this does sound troubling. Automakers always like to talk about how they anonymize their data and have repeatedly stressed that the cameras aren't supposed to come with any sort of facial recognition software, but that's something that could easily be pushed via a single over-the-air update by the manufacturer. It doesn't really make sense when the data is being used for targeting marketing. The drivers are understandably skeptical, especially considering we have countless examples of similar tech eventually crossing the threshold of what many would, I guess we're missing a word here, deem deeply unacceptable, up to and including, I think I've seen even in passing, stories of the people who are wherever they warehouse this data sharing among themselves, look at this thing I accidentally found, or quite purposely found, but are pretending as accidental, video from inside the car. And boy, oh boy, you'll never get what this couple is doing in the car. Haha, isn't that funny? But it's anonymized. We don't know who they are, or at least wink, wink. The person who gave it to you says, I don't know who this is. It's my ex-girlfriend, but whatever. This fittingly brings us back to flock traffic cameras. That's where I thought we were going to start, which continue to see widespread implementation within the U.S. We've covered them before, specifically regarding cases where they were abused by law enforcement. That's maybe one of the background pieces we ought to read. There were numerous instances where officials had used them to stalk former romantic partners. See? Ex-girlfriend. Or the AI-based search algorithm failed to identify the correct vehicle, resulting in wrongful arrests. That's easy to imagine, too. Despite a surplus of public opposition, flock cameras have continued to grow in number. A relevant AI surveillance network also very early incorporated the Ring doorbell cameras that are installed in many homes. We've definitely heard about that. While the deal was abandoned earlier this year, in a rare case of these businesses reacting to public criticism, rumors suggest that similar partnerships are still being planned. Sadly, flock-related malfeasance has persisted as the number of cameras continues to grow. According to a recent report from 404 Media, we've definitely read their stuff. Hat tip there to Michael Accardi, was, I guess, their source for the article they read. There have been over a dozen known cases where police were caught using the network to illegally stalk people. Most of these instances involved individual officers using the system to frequently check in on the innocent party over a period of months. Additional criticisms have been made regarding how easily accessible the data happens to be. Authorities typically don't need to procure warrants to launch searches. They just need the login information. And hackers have shown that it's relatively easy to tap into the accounts or even the devices themselves. Public information requests likewise make it possible for people to know when and how data was accessed by authorities. That last component has thankfully allowed for journalists and concerned citizens to more easily identify specific instances of abuse, and that's how we're getting all of these wonderful articles about it. It is something to think about. We'll think about it even more after this.
Hi, Kagro in the Morning listeners. This is Rebecca Romans, longtime listener and longtime supporter of the show. Do you love your non-corporatized, completely independent, commercial-free Kagro in the Morning show? Do you stand out among the crowd at the office water cooler when discussing current events because of all the up-to-the-minute news you've been brought by David Waldman? Then it's time to give back a little. David relies on contributions from listeners like you and me to keep this show on the air. Patreon.com is among the easiest ways to make secure recurring monthly donations to support the show. Patreon.com/KagroX will bring you straight to his donation page, where you can sign up for any convenient tier you like. A mere $5 a month. You'll never miss it. Works out to about 25 cents a show. That means that David is making 12.5 cents an hour, which, by coincidence, is exactly what the GOP wants to lower the federal minimum wage to. Once again, David is ahead of the curve. If Patreon.com doesn't sound like your kind of thing, there's always PayPal, or even the Square Cash app. Any way you choose to donate, please choose to donate. And thank you on behalf of David and the rest of us listeners. Thank you very much.
All right, welcome back, everyone, to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I knew I had seen this in the last day or so since we were talking about the flock camera things, just before I get back to reading it. It's a lengthy article that I'm taking a look at here. I saw posted, let's see, who's posted this one? A professor, I guess. Professor, Ferguson. Andrew Guthrie Ferguson, in particular, law professor at GWU here in Washington, D.C., George Washington University. And what did he have a picture of here? Where did it come from? Let's see. Where's the what's the source of this photo? It's not telling me. I mean, it's giving me the URL, but I don't know what the hell that is. CL Tampa. Is that right? CL. So Tampa, Florida area. I don't know what CL is. It Coastal Living or something like that? It looks like a lifestyle magazine of some kind. Creative loafing. No, I'm not kidding. That's what it says here in the photo credit here. Credit to Valerie Smith, Creative Loafing, Tampa Bay. I thought that's interesting. So there's a magazine for every taste. But this was a picture that was circulating. What did Professor Ferguson have to say about it? Can I find it? Oh, this is amazing. He says a single 77, I guess he means year-old guy. Not a guy from 1977, but he was around, of course. But a single 77-year-old guy staging a protest against flock cameras. It reveals the depth of people's frustration with growing networks of self-surveillance, and yet reveals 3 deep misunderstandings of the challenges ahead. Oh, goodness, this is one of 5 tweets here. But the picture is of there's a flock camera, I guess, posted, mounted to this pole, which is, I guess, mounted roadside somewhere with some, interestingly, solar-powered. So Trump is going to be against that. Maybe we can get Trump to get rid of solar-powered flock cameras. Anyway, it's, pointed toward the road, and in protest, he has set up a lawn chair, is sitting under an umbrella to stay out of the hot Florida sun, although, you moved to Florida, sir. I don't know. Anyway. But he's also brought with him like a long pole of his own, nearly as tall as I guess just about as tall as the height of the camera is mounted on the pole he's seated next to. But he's got his own handheld pole with a big, I don't know, like a piece of cardboard or something taped to the end of it. And he's just sitting there, as he has a right to do, but with this cardboard on a pole blocking the camera. So that's an interesting protest all by itself. It makes for a good picture. Maybe I'll keep this post open so that we can come back and take a look at what the professor has to say about these things after we've read through the rest of this Truth About Cars entry, where we left off reading about, public information requests likewise make it possible for people to know when and how data was accessed by authorities. I'm worried about all of that stuff. You can find out, but who has the time to go through that? And who even knows when you become aware of some suspicion that someone is listening to you? I guess now you have to make a full-time job of monitoring all the time others are spending monitoring you. Who can afford that? But that last component has thankfully allowed for journalists like these guys and concerned citizens like the guy in the picture to more easily identify specific instances of abuse. But this doesn't guarantee any amount of public privacy. This doesn't guarantee any amount of public privacy. Only applies to government browsing. I'm not certain how to parse that sentence, but private flock clients, such as corporations or something like an HOA, for instance, typically have the option to keep their search history entirely to themselves. I get it. Thank you. Now that has parsed the sentence for me. Complete writing. Well done. From 404 Media, the following is quoted from the piece that he reviewed earlier. The known cases of police stalking are almost certainly a vast underreporting of the overall abuse because they largely include only cases in which the behavior was so egregious that it led to police officers being fired, arrested, or both. Flock told 404 Media that it is aware of 15 incidents of abuse, each surfaced because of the transparency and accountability features deliberately built into our platform. Okay, I mean, it's taking credit for having a database, which honestly was going to be built into the thing whether they needed it for accountability purposes or not, but there it is. There are also 140,000 monthly active users of Flock, so the relatively rare instances of abuse, while obviously wrong and awful, are exactly that, rare. A Flock spokesperson told 404 Media, humans are fallible. Unlike most tools society provide law enforcement, Flock ensures that the instances when our technology is misused, the evidence used to hold responsible parties accountable is right there in our system. We also encourage all our customers to have a usage policy, regular training, and to implement our audit assistance tool, which proactively flags unintended use. I mean, it's the best you can do if you aren't going to outlaw the things outright. Okay. Well, I shouldn't say the best you can do. You could probably do better. I don't know how, but maybe in the future we'll have some idea about that, and it'll probably grow out of these continuing abuses, though. It is definitely the case that Flock's audit tools have proven useful in holding police accountable because journalists, activists, and concerned citizens from around the country have poured through Flock audit logs that they have obtained through public records requests to document abuse. This is still from 404 Media, by the way. But it is also the case that Flock has strenuously fought against lawsuits and potential regulations that are seeking to require police to get a warrant to use the system, and many cases of abuse have not been detected by police departments themselves, but by those private citizens, journalists, and stalking victims who have found patterns of abuse in public records files they have obtained from their local police departments. In most cases of Flock-related stalking reviewed by 404 Media, the abuse occurred over the course of months or years, and the victims were subjected to dozens or hundreds of lookups. Other abuse cases have been discovered using the website haveibeenflocked.com. I guess you should take note of that. A website that compiles Flock searches released via public records requests and turns them into searchable databases. All right, that's an interesting thing. So you can go to haveibeenflocked.com, I guess. I guess at the most basic level, I don't know whether this is, I guess, how I would use it. I don't know that I have any evidence I've been stalked in particular, but can I look up, has my license plate been read somewhere? I'm sure it has. It must have been it somewhere. Nothing came of it. They just read it passively and documented it. But I'm sort of curious, like, where do they do that, and how often do they do that? How often does it show up? Anyway, Flock has repeatedly tried to get that website taken down, as we have previously reported. I guess here, that was at 404 Media, has repeatedly reported this. Now back to the work of the Truth About Cars. The company has attempted to frame the network as nothing more than license plate readers, but this has repeatedly been proven false. So I'm wrong about that. There's more to it. Search tools clearly allow customers to locate vehicles using nothing more than make/model, vehicle color, and any identifying characteristics, dents, stickers, etc. Citizen testing has also proven that the cameras activate whenever pedestrians approach them. However, there's been no concrete evidence that they prioritize facial recognition so far. Suggesting that the network has been extremely unpopular with the public would be an understatement. Cities in the process of implementing Flock cameras have seen town hall meetings with attendees expressing their broad distaste. The response in America has been similar to the reception of ultra-low emission zone cameras in the United Kingdom. Ultra-low emission zone, ULEZ, but I don't know what that's about, but we could look it up separately. While ULEZ cameras allegedly exist to enforce, here's the answer, to enforce regional emissions compliance. I guess, are you rolling coal where there's supposed to be no motor vehicles? So we'll catch you, I guess. That's just called surveillance. But anyway, they were likewise promoted by the British government as nothing more than license plate readers, initially, I guess. This has not appeased locals who have taken upon themselves to destroy the cameras en masse. There's even a loosely organized group of British citizens known as Blade Runners, oddly enough, who promote various methods of doing so over social media. And here's a warning a sign that such cameras are in use. And the LEZ, ULEZ, so low emission zone and ultra low emission zone, which, if you're standing there reading it, it does say les, les. So anyway, what can I tell you about that? It's annoying to see that out there regardless. All right. Well, anyway, the kids will have a field day with that one. Wonderful. Americans now seem to be getting in on the action. Over the last 12 months, there have been multiple cases of individuals destroying Flock cameras in California, where the activists are. Oh, and Oregon, where Justice is probably doing it. No, he's definitely not doing that. And very likely not the case. But he's probably rooting for people who do. I don't know. Anyway, California and Oregon, multiple cases of individuals destroying Flock cameras, and they might even be, conservative Republican libertarians doing it, like Thomas Massey. But here in these cases on the West Coast, where the person was intentionally targeting as many devices as possible. Meanwhile, similar acts of vandalism appear to be growing just about everywhere in the country. Ironically, of course, Donald Trump has pointed a bunch of cameras at the reflecting pool where there's no vandalism going on, but in the hopes of catching vandalism. So, meanwhile, the conservative libertarian types and freedom lovers everywhere are turning against this thing, but also voting for Donald Trump. Interestingly, 404 Media has also reported that a company known as Signal Trace is currently developing a way for traffic cameras to tap into Bluetooth devices, phones, smartwatches, etc., with the intent to identify specific individuals. This applies to persons both walking by or riding in an automobile. While this is something Flock has said it wasn't doing, numerous investigations using the camera network explicitly set out track specific people with the vehicle simply being the identifying object. All right. It seems reasonable to assume that surveillance companies and governments will swiftly embrace additional technologies that make that easier, including whatever Signal Trace happens to be working on. Signal jammers are widely available for purchase online, typically by way of Chinese suppliers. So you, I guess, want to also be aware of the possibility that it's not jamming your signal, it's transmitting one, except that sending it to China instead of doing what you want it to do. While they would certainly be effective at preventing the cameras and loads of other wireless devices from operating within a given area, setup can be complicated, and actually using them would be deemed a criminal act just about everywhere in the world. In fact, the resulting penalties for utilizing frequency jammers could be significantly harsher than being caught destroying a few $100s of corporate-owned property. So the cheaper way to go, I guess, is doing the individual camera destruction. Just say. Suffice it to say, legal solutions to the problem appear to be depressingly limited. Protesting only seems to work sporadically at the local level, and federal representatives look to be wholly disinterested in acknowledging public opinion. Wonder why. Criminal acts of vandalism and making extensive and potentially illegal modifications to modern vehicles certainly aren't avenues the citizenry wanted to take in order to maintain a modicum of privacy. However, with the pleas of drivers going broadly unheard by governments, insurance firms, and automotive manufacturers alike, it was probably the inevitable outcome. One assumes that will remain the case as the tech sees broader implementation and new and even more invasive features. And here's another image here of, I don't know what. This is one of the Flock cameras, I guess, which is covered in, I don't know what kind of substance there, but I guess it's covering up the lens casing for the camera. As someone's thrown, it's not paint, but milk or something that they happen to have on hand. And I guess it effectively and for low cost does the trick. Unless, of course, there's video of you throwing that substance onto the camera. In which case, I don't know. I guess they come and get you. So let's see. Yeah, interesting. I guess we'll go back and see what the professor had to say about this creative loafing. I love that magazine title. The creative loafing story about the guy who just spends some number of hours each day sitting in the shade of his own umbrella, holding up a placard to block one local Flock camera. Let's see. What did he say about this thing? That he's got a whole thread going on here. This is amazing. Single 77-year-old guy staging a protest against Flock cameras. But he introduces a longer thread here. Yet reveals 3 deep misunderstandings of the challenges ahead. Let's see what they may be. Misunderstanding number 1. It is not the surveillance tool, but the systems that are frightening. The camera is not as problematic as the networked system and analytics platform behind it. Sure, I can understand that. Misunderstanding number 2, it is not the company, but the technology. Flock isn't the only company selling ALPRs, is that automatic license plate readers. In fact, Axon is directly benefiting from the deflock movement. Axon is all in on AI surveillance. The protest needs to include all ALPRs. Scott has got some messaging coming through to her. Let's get through the 3 misunderstandings first. But yeah, Axon is one of the main manufacturers of body cams for police, and of course making a mint on the public demand that police, for accountability purposes, always wear body cameras, but they keep turning them off, and interestingly, they're even less interested in being surveilled than the general public. But But yeah, so if you're out there protesting, we hate flock cameras, get rid of flock cameras, and local authorities respond to that by saying, all right, we'll just use Axon cameras instead. People haven't figured out they should be protesting Axon for some reason. And, I don't think that voters, if they, get the full picture, are going to accept that as an excuse. Well, we did say get rid of flock cameras, and they did do that. They swapped them for Axon cameras. I don't think that's, something they'll be rewarding people at the ballot box for doing, but it's out there. It's happening. Misunderstanding number 3, it's not just privacy that's being eroded, but power. Policing platforms are really panoptic threats to democratic power. Building real-time crime centers and networks of surveillance threatens how we have lived for centuries. We do have to get used to that. Perhaps not that we need to accept it necessarily, but that we need to come to understand that we are, in fact, constantly under surveillance, and that changes the way we think about ourselves, in a philosophical way. Things that we think are not being monitored or traditionally have thought were outside the interest or scope of government surveillance that now are, that seem innocuous to you, but may not be innocuous in actuality, or may not be regarded as innocuous anyway by your government. And I think, not too long ago, I saw circulated, and might be able to come up with it, but a cartoon, a political cartoon that kind of made the point, being circulated by everybody's blue sky friends at LA Taco, the In Fact Taco folks, who have been active and outspoken in opposing the ICE marauding in LA and elsewhere. But this time, a flock camera related political cartoon in which the protagonists are discussing underneath the gaze not only of 2 flock cameras, but of a drone, I guess, flying above them without noticing it, in which a guy with a I have a gun beard, the goatee and the wraparound shades and a baseball hat, not necessarily a MAGA hat, but certainly could be. It's in the style, saying and pointing up to the cameras, saying to the woman he's talking to, I'm fine with mass surveillance because I'm not doing anything wrong. And definitely a lot of people who take that tack. But the answer that she gives is, yeah, you're not doing anything wrong until someone changes the definition of what's, quote, wrong, right? I'm not doing anything wrong until you find out that it's illegal to even approach a flock camera because they're afraid that the only reason you would be approaching it is to damage it. And you find out that that's at least a misdemeanor. I'm not afraid. I'm fine with surveillance because I'm not doing anything wrong. Actually, guess what? You just found out you are. You didn't know, but as it turns out, you are. And now you find yourself under arrest and having to defend yourself against these ridiculous charges of some sort of misdemeanor offense. All right, let's see. I guess we're not done with what the professor was saying. I have to head back to there. He's explained the 3 misunderstandings, but the fact that ordinary folks across the country are seeing the tools, companies, and privacy dangers of surveillance tech is heartening and sort of inspiring, but the problems are deeper than ALPRs. We need more attention paid to the broader dangers of self-surveillance. And you'll never guess, he's written a book on it, and you might be interested in checking it out. It is called Your Data Will Be Used Against You: Policing in the Age of Self-Surveillance, again by Andrew Guthrie Ferguson, the cover of which is displayed here in the last post of his thread. But, interestingly, it's not a link to a buy the book page. So, quite a restrained offering. Though he did initially link to this piece from Creative Loafing. Just want to point that out again. Valerie Smith, July 25th, story about the guy sitting there with the cardboard or whatever it is taped to the pole in protest of one flock cameras. And I guess Professor Ferguson is trying to say, remember, it's not really necessarily the cameras, but that's the input point for the data, which is the bigger concern. And, you can't put a cardboard placard in the way of the data itself. This is the one point at which you can interact with any number of the cameras. And so the symbolic protest should be enough. Flock cameras have been in St. Petersburg, I guess, which is where this picture was taken, since 2022. And while police say they help solve crimes, they help get police arrested for stalking their ex-girlfriends anyway. Civil liberties advocates say they create an unprecedented mass surveillance network. That's what everyone's worried about. The protester's name, by the way, he freely gives it, Carl Gunn, with 2 N's, and the extra N is for nutcase. No, it's a reasonable concern he's got here anyway. Carl Gunn, 77, was concerned for his privacy when he spotted a camera outside his St. Petersburg neighborhood of Kokina Key. I guess we say key, others say K, I suppose. Mounted on a 12-foot tall black pole. Gunn later learned that the device was operated by a private for-profit company and that it automatically loads license plates and AI-generated profiles of each passing car into a massive database, for which they needed to bulldoze his house and make a new data center, I guess. It doesn't say that in there, but that's coming soon. The only 12-foot pole Gunn had was his pool skimmer. He taped a sign to it. Oh, that's actually great. It's got a nice framework for holding the sign, the pool skimmer part. He taped the sign to it, grabbed a camping chair, and sat himself in front of the camera. This Saturday, all the camera saw was Gunn's sign, which read "Down with Flock Cameras." And then the Axon people rubbed their hands together and collected stock dividends. "This is just another thing to take our information and spy on us," Gunn told Creative Loafing Tampa Bay. I love that. "Yeah, I have a constitutional right to my privacy. I'm a law-abiding citizen, and I don't need anyone sticking their nose in my business. If they do, I'm going to chop it off," which, is not law-abiding. Anyway, this was Gunn's second protest against flock cameras, his first being a week prior at a camera a few blocks away. CL interviewed Gunn as he sat under the sun with his sign and watched the public's reaction to his protest. Gunn was eventually joined by a supportive stranger who brought him a shade umbrella and a cold soda. Passing drivers honked in support, and then they were all arrested for it. And one even dropped off cold drinks and snacks out of her passenger window. All right. So, you get the idea here. I don't think we need to go that much further into the creative loafing coverage, given the detailed technical coverage we've gotten before. But okay, I guess the point of interest here is that I'm sure that the readership of Creative Loafing Tampa Bay probably not heading to their favorite publication or website for political stories, right? But then being introduced to these things through various, I guess we'll call it civilian openings here, where you can interest people in things that end up being political stories after all. And I think that's what Scott actually was messaging about here. Let me go take a look. People all over semi-rural Ohio are sawing the flock cameras down. And again, you really have gotten yourself in trouble by calling it flock. Saw the flock down. Right, got it. Okay. People all over semi-rural Ohio sawing them down with large pipe cutters, like Paul Newman did to parking meters in the open of Cool Hand Luke. So also something for film buffs and entertainment nuts. Dems could appeal to rural voters somehow here, or the GOP will. Although I'd love to see how they do it. I mean, Thomas Massie, I guess, is open to doing it. It'd be very interesting to see them try and capture these voters. And I think they could do it, and they probably will, and will regret watching it, I suppose. But it would be very interesting to watch them do it as the law and order party. That everybody needs to go out there and saw down the police cameras. Interesting. Could be unifying in a way. But, yeah. Now, I don't know how much faith I have in the overall umbrella organization of the Democratic Party to correctly message this thing. Unless, of course, you can somehow translate it into it's a kitchen table issue, affordability, and people are getting parking tickets and traffic tickets, and they can't afford them. And I'm sure they'll try to put it through that lens, which, is a legitimate lens. That's what people are worried about, is having, the weight of the law enforcement apparatus coming down on them for something that they didn't even think was a big deal or just isn't being monitored. And all of a sudden you're being handed this ticket. But I guess if the conservative approach to that is if you did the thing, then sorry, you're going to have to pay the ticket. It's just interesting. It used to be that this was just not a feasible method of law enforcement. You had to be observed by a police officer, but now we can automate the job. And of course, it's also subject to error. This was I mentioned that this kind of entered my consciousness through the shot spotter realm, where, once again, audio technology being installed all over various cities that was said to be, well, it's here to detect the sound of gunfire, and if there are enough shot spotter installations around a city, they can triangulate and give you the position of where you heard shots fired, and the police can go and enforce the law and respond to the emergency appropriately, and it will help, figure out and solve the crimes involved in all of this. And I guess that sounded like a good idea to crime-ridden neighborhoods, but then it turned out, one, it was, recording car backfires as well and firecrackers, and I guess it could be forgiven for making that mistake. But then people began to wonder, and the wondering began to get borne out by finding out that it was also recording passerby conversations of all sorts, and they claimed that the sorting data, to keep the operators from going crazy, was just not passing that information on to people, but the information was there, and if you knew how to hack at it, you could get those recorded street corner conversations, and sometimes police were interested in those too. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone, to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. Let's see, there was another piece related to all of this that Scott had sent, and I didn't really necessarily think we were going to spend that much time on it, but it is very interesting. Let's see. Here's the piece from The Guardian, which is, I think, the second of the two that he sent, unless I just happened to cross this thing and put it away. Yeah, this might be, he may have sent this, but then this is, I think, the same photo illustration that I saw in the piece today that was about, I thought it was about UK activity, but might in fact be describing U.S. activity, or maybe they just used the same photo in describing a similar phenomenon in the UK. Inside the growing vigilante movement to knock out flock surveillance cameras. That sounds like what Scott was talking about happening in Ohio. Sanya Mansour is the reporter. An underground network of privacy activists is disabling or destroying the ubiquitous surveillance devices sprouting up across the U.S. And now, just for the moment, because I'm conspiratorially minded here, wouldn't it be something if they were activists paid by Axon to go out there and destroy flock cameras? Then they had to be replaced by Axon equipment instead, because local procurement authorities have been effectively lobbied by citizens to boycott flock equipment. What a great business model that would be. And the next generation of you'll get in trouble for that just as surely as anything else, but what the next generation is when Elon Musk enters the surveillance camera market and uses Twitter to drum up anti-flock and anti-Axon activism, and then all of those cameras find themselves being smashed by autonomous robots built by Elon Musk's other ventures, who are tunneling underneath the cameras using boring company equipment and then plucking them down like Bugs Bunny on his way to Pismo Beach. You get the idea. All right, now the real reporting. The first time that no mark, that's what it says here, quote, no mark, N-O, capital N-O, capital M-A-R-K. First time that no mark tried to knock out a flock camera feed, this must be the person's online handle, he waited an hour for the perfect moment, pacing in and out of the bushes that towered over him, a few feet behind a pole holding up the device. I was just so nervous, he says. There's a lot of hours going into the disabling of one camera. No Mark, as he's known on Instagram, has already gained an online following of hundreds of thousands for posting videos of himself wearing a black mask and taking on small-time vigilante missions, breaking up fights outside a bar. Oh, gosh. So he's like, great, a TikTok superhero. Breaking up fights outside of a bar and breaking into a refinery he believed was, quote, polluting the city real bad, unquote. Well, that's not enough, but there's a TikTok future for Tina Peters in this. The Minnesota Star-Tribune dubbed him Minneapolis's Batman. It's fairly accurate. We don't know what the hell Batman was up to, really. He spoke to The Guardian under condition of anonymity to discuss potential illegal acts. On this June night, he set his sights on a new target, automated license plate readers made by the U.S. company Flock Safety. These black cameras, which are hooked up to a rectangular solar panel and typically mounted on a pole, snap photos of passing vehicles and run the pictures against large databases. They have sparked nationwide backlash from pro-privacy critics who point to public records suggesting that these devices can help law enforcement keep tabs on specific license plates and the people driving these cars, that they can sweep in so many people's locations from an innocent act in a public space, regardless of whether the target is a suspect in a crime and without a warrant, has led to fears of mass surveillance. We've definitely thought about this a long time on the show, and I think probably, I guess, from the advent of widespread deployment of the license plate readers, that you are, after all, publicly displaying the license plates. This is not something you would have a expectation of privacy, and the privacy, such as it was, of driving around with an outward-facing identifier on your car, was that there was simply not the data processing capacity to do this, to take note of everything that passes and to assemble a route, a mappable route based on the various cameras you pass, and to keep track of those things. No human brain could have kept all that information. Even if they wrote it down, they wouldn't have been able to analyze all the information in any useful way. But computers are taking care of that, and now that we have cheap data storage, or, well, relatively cheap data storage, I guess, even though we're now spending billions and billions of dollars on that data storage, even though most people intend to use it for making fake cryptocurrency and probably surfing for porn. But, whatever. We made use of it along the way for other things. So things that were very obviously public-facing for 100 years, everybody just, got used to and didn't worry too much about the privacy implications because there was no human capacity to sort this in any way that was meaningful. And now that we have that, the outward-facing identifiers that we've agreed to for 100 years because there was no such thing as capturing all the information and making sense of it is now a concern. And, I guess the concern stems not so much from, maybe it's not the data, but it's the forcing people to have these outward identifiers. But that was the agreement, Well, at the very least, if a witness sees somebody with this license plate do something terrible, they can tell police. Okay, but yeah, we didn't anticipate. Now every license plate is being tracked all the time, whether they did something bad or not, or whether there are any witnesses or not. Cameras are witnesses. Okay. It's a philosophical problem. So where were we here? In the Guardian reporting, Flock, based in Georgia and valued at $8.4 billion, says its cameras scan license plates billions of times each month in about 6,000 communities in nearly every state in the U.S. The company said in a February blog post that its ALPRs are not mass surveillance tools. Well. All right, that's the end of the show, everybody. And it cannot track vehicles, much less individual people. But I think it can. Across the street from a Taco Bell, No Mark couldn't stop thinking about whether he would get caught. He should. And the adrenaline felt paralyzing. He should worry about it. I don't know whether he should get caught or not. Felt paralyzing, even though this felt on brand for his online persona, which has won him more than 700,000 followers on Instagram and TikTok. After a few minutes of not spotting any cars on the road, he climbed a few feet up the pole, taped up the camera to block its lens, and snipped the wires that powered the whole operation. He then ended his phone's recording and fled. And I mean, I guess there's the hole in the system. There is, he recorded the whole thing and is also uploading that to, well, more or less the same database and the same data storage systems that were being fed by the cameras whose wires it cut. And by the way, I don't know how interested he would be in having the wires on his, if it were possible, to cut the phone wires inside of his phone, because after all, he inadvertently filmed neighbors' homes and invaded their privacy in producing his pro-privacy video there. But, there's foibles to everything. All right. Nowadays, No Mark is much calmer on these excursions, and it only takes him a few minutes to get the job done after having taken down more than a dozen cameras, he says, but he still assumes the police are looking for him. Even if he does get arrested, he's hopeful the charges won't be too severe. I mean, I don't think that's a great plan. And more important, he, quote, just wants to send a message. I don't know if that'll help you at all, but maybe the jury will be sympathetic. I'm not afraid to do things if I think they're right, he says. Yeah, These things are coming up so fast across the country that this is kind of the only way to combat them. And I guess so long as the target is a bunch of cameras, people are okay and content to have it go on. But eventually, if he's the kind of person that decides, well, one of the things that I think is not right is abortion, well, then you have a troublesome fellow after all. The Minneapolis camera destroyer is not alone. As anger grows toward law enforcement contracts with Flock, vigilantes across the country are taking matters into their own hands by smashing, obstructing, or taking down these cameras. Many are leaning into their creative side, paint bombing the devices, planting American flags at the scene after damaging them, 3D printing objects to help obstruct the camera's view, and leaving colorful messages like, "Ha ha, get wrecked, you surveilling Fs." Okay, we'll surveil the language there. You get the idea. We'll use Flock for that. Ha ha, get wrecked, you surveilling flocks, you might say. Some influencers are even creating fake cease and desist letters from Flock, capitalizing on the company's negative public perception. Not sure what they're doing with them, but okay. The Guardian has identified at least 33 instances of people damaging, vandalizing, and destroying Flock cameras across 23 states that appear to have the explicit message of protesting surveillance. Flock, along with police departments across the U.S., say these cameras are integral for public safety or national security, if you have that kind of bent, and capture vehicle details that can help in investigations, such as license plate numbers and the make and model of vehicles. And I think a lot of the people cheering for this also would no doubt cheer if there were an Amber Alert going out and somebody has kidnapped a child and is suspected of trying to spirit them away for sex trafficking, being the current mania, and you can actually find that car and save the child thanks to this technology. Hooray for that, but tomorrow I'll destroy it, and then the next sex trafficker will get away, I guess, but, the point is something. You get how this could be problematic. And why claims from police departments that these are for public safety make some amount of sense. Anyway, Flock's website also advertises how these cameras can stop crime in real time. It's a good tagline. By alerting officers the moment a suspect car passes by. The issue, of course, is what makes for a suspect car and why. Suggesting that cops can act quickly on those leads to pursue a target. On the other hand, cops can also nap on that information and continue to eat donuts and do nothing. So you should point that out as well. The company's CEO, Garrett Langley, has described some pro-privacy critics as wanting to normalize lawlessness and weaken public safety. No mark has not been caught in his campaign against flock cameras, although I guess if they just, watch YouTube or TikTok, they could make it happen. And, don't think that they can't try and get TikTok or YouTube to give up the identity or any identifying information about the user who posts these things if they really wanted to pursue it. Anyway, others are facing charges. Jeffrey Sovereign of Suffolk, Virginia, has been charged with destruction of property for allegedly damaging more than a dozen flock cameras. Sovereign has not admitted to the act, but he did tell police that he finds these cameras to be unconstitutional. That's nice. Good. It's nice that you think so, but it doesn't say much. He wrote on a GoFundMe page created to pay for legal expenses, "I will take the silver lining that this can be a catalyst in a bigger movement to roll back intrusive surveillance." Then he went on to cut off a piece of the reflecting pool. I guess, maybe. I don't know. A handful of other cases have drawn criminal charges too. In New Mexico, Jevon, maybe? It's Jevon. Jevon, it could be just pronounced that way, or they might give a Spanish pronunciation to it. Martinez being his last name. That's what makes it a possibility. Anyway, Jevon Martinez was arrested after allegedly destroying 13 flock cameras. An unlucky number. That was your problem there, sir. When asked if he would continue to take down these flock cameras, Martinez told local news station KRQE, "Absolutely. They are a clear and present threat to public safety." The news outlet also reported that a sign near one of the damaged flock cameras read, "You're welcome, the Republic of New Mexico." Flock did not, I don't know whether he was telling the Republic of New Mexico they were welcome to this action or he's signing it on behalf of something that he imagines exists, and maybe it does, the Republic of New Mexico. Flock did not comment on vigilantes knocking out its cameras, but did publish a blog post in mid-July about helping government agencies respond if a camera is damaged. "We've planned for it," the company wrote, adding that protection plans are available for purchase. We've planned for it. Buy a 3-year protection plan from us. Law enforcement is aware of the backlash and responding. Dozens of state fusion centers, collaborative hubs where federal and local agencies share intelligence about crime and terrorism, whatever that may mean, circulated memos across law enforcement agencies this summer directing officers to monitor anti-flock advocacy as part of a directive to protect national security, according to reporting from journalist Dan. Really? Is this your name? Dan Boguslaw? Bogus Law. Really? That's amazing. Do you know Angie Craig? You guys got to get together. One report Bogus Law obtained from a Wisconsin intelligence agency calls for increased vigilance and patrols during protests and events such as a National Week of Action in mid-August. That Intelligence Digest also advised local law enforcement to report vandalism, disruption, or sabotage of ALPRs to fusion centers. By the way, I don't think it will be long before we witness a case in which somebody is tried specifically for damage to one of the flock cameras or other brands of ALPRs, which was destroyed inadvertently along with something else that they were in fact trying to destroy. Or somebody, I don't know, what happens, like what happens if you are drunk driving but also hit a pole and take out one of the flock cameras? Do they charge you with both? Probably. I don't know whether they'll be able to convince a jury that there was any intent if you were actually drunk. It kind of seems like a one or the other thing, but they'd probably charge you with both. But also, this previous paragraph lays the foundation for things like if you're anti-flock cameras. And I think most people probably, if you ask them about it and describe the situation, would say, yeah, I don't really want that. I guess you could put me down as anti-ALPR. Sure. And again, referring back to the cartoon from before, I'm not afraid of surveillance because I'm not doing anything wrong. The day they say anti-ALPR sentiment is terrorism sympathizing. And then, so now we want to check your bank accounts because you're a terrorist sympathizer. How did I get to be a terrorist sympathizer? You were asked what you thought about ALPRs, and you said you were, generally against them. And, of course, that's pro-law enforcement. Having them is pro-law enforcement and pro-law and order and national security, and you're against it, so you're now on a terrorism list. And you're on the watch list, and you can't fly anywhere as well. Sure, great. Well, are you against the surveillance now? Well, yes, now that it's too late, I am, now that you mention it. But now the comic is funny, so that's the silver lining. Flock faces public blowback is next. Let's keep it up. We'll make it a theme for the day. The winds of sympathy online are not blowing in Flock's favor. News articles and videos about vigilantes' cases have drawn support from online commenters who post made-up, neighborly alibis, like seeing accused parties rescuing dogs or serving meals at a soup kitchen at the time a camera was destroyed. The anti-Flock online ecosystem also features an exchange of tips and strategies for kneecapping the cameras. One Reddit poster shared a 3D print file for an object that he says can help block cameras without damaging them or violating vandalism laws. I mean, they say that, but I don't know if it's a lawyer producing them, so take it with a grain of salt. They may not know what they're talking about. No Mark in Minneapolis says he receives dozens of messages daily from people wanting to help, letting him know that they're taking similar actions or asking for advice on staying safe. He keeps his replies vague as he doesn't want his words to get people arrested. He tells those writing to him to avoid driving past the cameras, if that's something you can do, and to make sure they're going out late at night when no one else is around. He reiterates that they should cover up completely, including their face and hands. But not with any, I could imagine, clothing that would otherwise identify you. He also tells them always cover the camera. Minneapolis's Batman thinks you need both political pressure on elected officials and vigilantism to achieve change. He believes showing up to city council meetings, and he's shown up for a few without his mask, is helpful, but it does obviously take time, and it's not always effective. But I think that you could probably describe his Batman activities that way too. It obviously takes time to break up bar fights, and it may not always be effective or smart, for that matter. The more time you take, the more data they get on people. He said, what if you break up a bar fight between a would-be Batman and somebody else? He was punishing a wrongdoer, and then you stepped in and undid it. Privacy advocates pursue policy changes as vigilantes tear down cameras. More than 80 cities have disbanded, decided not to renew, or rejected contracts with Flock in recent years, or deactivated the company's cameras, including Austin and Denver, although activists remain concerned about the device's continued use in those areas. Beyond general surveillance creep, privacy advocates fear U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement's ability to access those camera feeds through legal loopholes to pursue immigrants. Oh, you can bet they're trying to do that. Police officers have used the cameras for their own personal ends as well. We've heard this story already, but several have lost their jobs after misusing the devices to stalk people. Though license plate reading is the camera's bread and butter, 404 Media, as we heard, reported last week that cops have used Flock's search feature to look for people with distinct markers like tattoos and specific T-shirts, and not just cars. And of course, if you can look for tattoos, you can support anybody. Look, they have a tattoo. We'll claim it's a gang tattoo, and there they go. Congress is taking note, and earlier this month, a Texas lawmaker introduced a bill requiring warrants for data collected by Flock cameras. That wasn't even Thomas Massey, because he's not from Texas. Not all anti-Flock activism takes the form of camera destruction. A crowdsourced map created by the grassroots group D-Flock maps out more than 115,000 ALPRs across the country. The organization's site also allows users to see if their license plates have been searched in Flock's system, get directions to avoid ALPRs, and find upcoming meetings about municipal Flock contracts. Flock's CEO has taken note of D-Flock's advocacy too, and characterized the organization as terroristic. That's just what we need. But recently apologized for that label. Oh, okay, that undoes it. Trump will not use it at all, ever. No way. In a tweet, he attributed D-Flock's popularity to his company's inadequate response to the questions and concerns that people have about ALPR. The company is adapting to the backlash, canceling an always-on recording feature. Human distress detection, which was intended to detect screaming. A local chapter of D-Flock in Norfolk, Virginia, says it does not endorse vigilantes targeting flock cameras, but does not advocate against it either. The Virginia chapter is working to ensure the city either cancels or does not renew its contract with Flock, but so far it hasn't had any success, and members are particularly angry about speaking restrictions on the topic. At a city council meeting last month, the mayor enforced a rule about reducing repetitive comments to limit the number of speakers who wanted to share their concerns about Flock, the Virginian Pilot reported. We recognize it's the inevitable outcome of a system designed to prevent people's voices from being heard, said a D-Flock spokesperson. Oh. Well, so it expands and brings people into political issues and political situations and the outcome of politics in ways they probably did not anticipate. Very interesting for that reason alone. Okay, we've spent an awful lot of time on it. That's true. But yeah, I find the nexus very interesting and worthy of some attention. You know what? This is kind of related, and something that Greg wanted to bring up yesterday, and we didn't get a chance to do it, and it's now receiving more widespread attention, only tangential to electronic surveillance, but just sort of an expansion of the police surveillance and response state, I guess. The Washington Post is reporting on it, and let's see, is this the one that Greg shared with me, or just one of several reports on it? I think it is one of several reports, but I don't know if that's the one he shared or not. But at any rate, look, it's got the information we need. We should just read it. Police vetted dubious allegation only after Pete Buttigieg was separated from his children. I mean, this kind of jumps into the late stages of the story, and it's changed the headline here. I think the original URL headline for this is in the URL. Source: bogus Buttigieg allegation appeared mentally unstable, records say. All right, here's what's going on here. The long story short, because we're bumping up against the next break, is someone targeted Pete Buttigieg for harassment, essentially, and police surveillance and all sorts of other adjacent issues. And you'll see what they are once we start describing this. But basically, an anonymous caller took advantage of the fact that you can do these things. You can make an anonymous report of child abuse because you got to protect kids, right, everywhere. So you can call a police department and say, I saw someone doing something that makes me suspect, or I directly witnessed child abuse that endangers the health or well-being or life of these specific children, and report them. And the authorities in many places are compelled to respond with family separation, at least for 24 hours, so that they can observe what's going on and see if they can corroborate such reports. And so now all it takes is, I hate this person, pick up the phone and allege that they're abusing their children, and the family is raided and separated for 24 hours, even on the most flimsy allegations. And there's supposed to be, I think they realized that early on, and there's supposed to be some checks and balances along the way, and guess what? None of them happened, and none of them worked in the case of Pete Buttigieg. Here's the story. The Michigan Attorney General's office is investigating how the accusation that prompted the ex-cabinet secretary's separation from his 4-year-old twins, was handled. Okay, here's the story as Olivia George, Aaron Cox, and Aaron Schaefer report it just before our next upcoming break. Officials who separated former Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg from his young twins last month relied on a vague and unsubstantiated allegation from an accuser authorities later deemed possibly, quote, mentally unstable, according to previously unreported police records, the records obtained by the Washington Post, and an interview with the apparent complainant offer the most detailed account yet of how a false tip led investigators to the home of one of the country's most prominent Democrats, drawing bipartisan outrage. At least the outrage is bipartisan. Although it might just be Thomas Massey. We'll find out. Child welfare experts who reviewed the documents at the Post's requests said they illuminate a flawed process that was made worse by poor judgment by agencies. Oh no, not that. And a lack of communication among investigators from 2 states. Where are all the AI things and use of gigantic databases that would have prevented this because of how smart their systems are? I just don't know. All right, you get the idea, the gist of the story. We'll return to it after this last break.
Sup fam, it's your boy Darwin, aka Darwin_Darko, aka the most reasonable man in America, aka KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back, everyone, to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Just setting aside a couple more stories that I definitely won't get to. But let me read you the rest of the Pete Buttigieg story. It's important and people are talking about it. And we neglected to get to it yesterday. It wasn't a neglectful thing. It was in Greg's queue in the background. But, you know, we got into things like flock cameras. And you'll eventually get around to the story. Now you're getting it, and you maybe heard a little bit about it. Here's some more details. So what we have here, Michigan State Police reports detail the chain of events from the allegation to its eventual determination that it was unfounded and potentially politically motivated. I think it was pretty easy to come to that conclusion. I skipped a paragraph or two here that I'll throw in. I don't think it's going to disrupt the flow too much. Child welfare experts who reviewed the documents at the Post's request said they illuminate a flawed process that was made worse by poor judgment by agencies, right? Oh, we didn't skip this one. And a lack of communications among investigators from 2 states. Now on to, all right, no mistakes made here, except the mistake that I thought I made a mistake. Michigan State Police reports detail the chain of events. Indiana child welfare authorities who received a tip on a hotline with very limited information, that's a quote, very limited information, about Buttigieg did not pass along the caller's name or contact information when notifying officials in Michigan, where Buttigieg now lives. Michigan police waited 6 days after approaching Buttigieg to attempt to identify the caller. By then, Buttigieg, a former mayor of South Bend, Indiana, a 2020 presidential candidate, had gone public with the ordeal in a June Substack post, so it's a while ago, describing it as the ugliest thing that has happened to me since my career in service began. Michigan authorities had told Buttigieg he could not be alone with his 4-year-old children until they could be interviewed away from their parents the next day, Buttigieg recounted. The children stayed with their grandparents who lived nearby. Buttigieg, who was widely expected to run for president again, called that 24-hour separation among the darkest hours of my life. Buttigieg said the authorities initially would not tell him what he was accused of. Vivek Sankaran, a professor at the University of Michigan Law School and a child advocacy law expert, said he was troubled that Michigan State Police went to Buttigieg's door with such a vague allegation that didn't present any indication that children were imminently at risk. At the very least, it's incredibly poor investigative work. I would even say reckless, in light of how harmful this is for the family, Sankaran said. It should scare all of us. But of course, yeah, probably politically motivated. And I guess, I don't know, that would probably make most people feel like it can't or won't happen to them, but you shouldn't rely on that. People just have to have a reason to hate you, and they can invent it if they are mentally unstable, or don't even have to know you for that matter. Michigan State Police spokesperson Lauren Thompson Phillips said the investigation was conducted promptly and the allegations were determined to be unfounded, adding that the department's responsibility was to assess and ensure the safety of the children involved. I'm already getting like Kavanaugh stop vibes from this, like, well, if it's just a 24-hour separation and it doesn't result in XYZ, although we don't know whether it does result in anything at all. I mean, family trauma, how do they measure it? Do they bother to measure it? Do they care? I don't know. Can they afford to care, given that sometimes the abuse allegations could be real? I don't know. But yeah, it's pretty bizarre. But yeah, I'm sure that, the Supreme Court, I guess if it happens to a Republican, they'll get all good and mad about it. If it happens to a Democrat, well, what can you do? It's just police doing their jobs. Stand back, sir. The first openly gay cabinet member confirmed by the Senate, Buttigieg, 44, has faced attacks from some corners over his sexual orientation and his decision to adopt 2 children with his husband, Chasen. He told the authorities, and I always wondered about the name. I mean, it is spelled as Chasen is. Does he say Chasten by any chance? Because, I don't know. I don't think I paid close enough attention during the 2020 election to find out. Anyway, he told authorities of the many threats his family receives, including death threats, according to the report. This has been a painful and infuriating situation for the family, Buttigieg spokesman Sean Manning said in a statement to the Post. They are in touch with Michigan authorities, seeking answers and accountability for what happened. The Michigan Attorney General's office has opened an investigation of the allegations against Buttigieg and how it was handled, spokeswoman Kimberly Bush told the Post. Common sense would have shown that this targeted report plainly lacked credibility on its face, Bush said. Before children are separated from their families, due diligence should be exercised to ensure some nexus exists between the source and the family, or that the complaint comes from a reputable, reliable, or verifiable source. We have requested the Michigan State Police turn over all evidence at the completion of their investigation, and will zealously investigate all leads, policies, and procedures that allowed for such a flagrant violation of the Buttigieg's privacy. There's your nexus with the former story, privacy. Officials at Michigan and Indiana State Police Departments and child welfare authorities declined to answer questions about what, if any, steps they took to verify the allegations before contacting Buttigieg. Thompson Phillips did not respond to a specific question about why state police waited 6 days to request information from Indiana authorities about the complaint, or rather the complainant, the person who filed the complaint. Ron Green, the spokesperson for the Indiana Department of Child Services, said the agency followed established procedures, including not sharing information about callers. After this article first published, Green said the agency's policy does not allow for caller information to be shared with other child welfare agencies and law enforcement. Interesting. He and Michigan child welfare authorities declined to comment specifically about the Buttigieg case. After receiving a partially redacted copy of the Michigan State Police report that referenced a Facebook post by the caller, the Post was able to identify and contact the woman who said she lived in Alabama. Public records show she has also lived in Indiana. In a phone call, she was unable to answer basic questions about her accusations. She acknowledged that she made reports about Buttigieg to authorities, but declined to say to whom. The Post is not naming the woman because it was unclear whether she was fully aware that she was speaking to a media outlet on the record. When asked to corroborate her claims with dates, documents, and other specifics, she did not, and accused the reporter who identified herself as a journalist with the Post when contacting the woman and at the start of the interview of working with Buttigieg on a cover-up. The Michigan State Police report redacts the complainant's name and details of the allegations, but the woman's comments to the Post align with what Buttigieg has recounted being told by authorities and non-public details on the police report, including that she met him in the small city of Florence, Alabama. Michigan authorities had asked Buttigieg during their investigation if he had traveled to Florence at any time between 2021 and 2023, and his attorney confirmed to them that he had not after reviewing travel records. The woman said a sergeant from the Indiana State Police had since called her and was, quote, harassing her. Indiana State Police spokesperson Ron Galaviz confirmed an ongoing investigation of an allegation of false reporting, but said he was unable to comment further. Thompson Phillips, the Michigan State Police spokeswoman, said the agency is deferring to Indiana to identify the accuser and will then evaluate whether any charges are appropriate. Now, here's how the Buttigieg investigation unfolded. Authorities must balance taking child abuse allegations seriously with preventing misuse of the reporting system, the spokesperson for the Michigan Attorney General's office said. The office's investigation into Buttigieg's case also claims to reduce the risk of false allegations of child abuse against other well-known residents and elected officials as the newest form or threat or intimidation, the spokesperson said. I guess put that alongside swatting, which was the previous craze. Under Indiana law, anyone who suspects a child has been abused is required to make a report, and the Department of Child Services must initiate an assessment within 24 hours. I guess one of the problems I would point out among ultra-conservatives, for instance, and you might find such people in Indiana, even if they're not quote-unquote mentally unstable, although I would question whether whether the definition is broad enough. But there are, of course, people who insist for religious reasons or just conservative ideological reasons or just plain craziness that by definition any gay parent is, in their mind, abusing their children. That's crazy. It's baseless and bigoted, but they might claim to believe it. And if they're obligated to report it, well, you might get a situation like this. I don't know if that's what happened here, but you could easily see it happening. Under Indiana law, you could also easily see it being done coyly. I fully believe that. And I'm obligated by the law, and I'm an upstanding citizen, and I did this report because I knew it would make me famous. Under Indiana law, right, we said anybody who suspects must make a report. In Michigan, a Children's Protective Services investigation, quote, must begin within 24 hours of a report and usually includes face-to-face interviews with the alleged victims and perpetrators, plus a viewing of the child's home. Buttigieg's case involved extra complications with multiple agencies across 2 states. Their interactions and information sharing are partially detailed in the Michigan State Police report. Indiana police officials learned about the woman's call on June 22nd. They notified Michigan authorities on June 23rd, prompting a Michigan State Police trooper and child welfare official to visit Buttigieg later that day. In his Substack post, Buttigieg said that he was not told the details of the allegations against him and that he was told to stay at a hotel or send his children to stay with relatives until they could be interviewed the next day. Buttigieg and his husband, who was not accused of wrongdoing, made the decision to send the 4-year-old twins to their grandparents. The children sat alone for separate hour-long interviews with investigators on June 24th and told investigators they felt safe, according to police records. An Indiana child welfare worker contacted the caller again before referring the case to Michigan, reports show, but gained no new information. Those reports do not detail any further attempts by Indiana or Michigan police officials to vet the tip before the visit to Buttigieg. When Michigan investigators interviewed Buttigieg, they told him they did not have the name of the person who made the allegations against him, according to Buttigieg and the police records. On June 26th, Buttigieg went public. The Michigan State Police publicly said the allegation against him was false. On June 29th, a week after the initial tip, a Michigan child welfare worker told Michigan State Police officials that Indiana police informed her that the possible person who reported the allegation was a, quote, mentally unstable woman in Indiana. That's when reports show the Michigan State Police contacted the Indiana counterparts to get the caller's identity, and an Indiana investigator said they would try to interview her to verify the allegations and determine if she made a false report. Indiana State Police did not answer the Post's questions about the claim the accuser was mentally unstable. The woman did not respond to a question about this description of her. This case highlights everything that's wrong with the system of reporting and investigating where no one has accountability, said Dale Margolin Tseka, a professor of law and director of Albany Law's Family Violence Litigation Clinic. And a family is traumatized because of it. Under an ideal system, Tseka said, and it's C-E-C-K-A, Tseka, I'm not sure how it's pronounced, said that Indiana authorities ideally would have better vetted the caller and shared the identity of the tipster with Michigan, who should have done their own vetting and declined to act on an anonymous allegation. An Indiana State investigator looked into the caller and reported finding a Facebook post in which the caller urged people not to vote for Buttigieg and referenced her accusation weeks before she contacted authorities, according to the Michigan report, which does not say when the post was found. The other social media posts viewed by the Post, in other posts, the woman praised other Democrats, so I guess that's supposed to mean maybe she's not necessarily a Republican activist, but just an anti-Buttigieg activist. The woman told the Post that she decided to contact authorities about Buttigieg because she was worried about his children and his presidential ambitions. She declined to say why she waited years to report her allegations. The police report said she told the Indiana child welfare worker that she did not know why she waited. Meanwhile, Buttigieg said in his Substack post that he's grappling with what the ordeal means for his family and his country. Even though the accusation was absurdly and obviously false and was promptly rejected by law enforcement, I still worry about the harm it has done, he wrote. And at the most basic level, I worry about how anyone, even in today's world, could fail to respect the absolutely fundamental principle that whatever you think about someone in politics, you leave people's kids out of it. All right, an important story. Absolutely had to get on the record because I think you'll probably see copycat instances, and whether they're all against Buttigieg, I don't know, or whether they're against other openly gay candidates, seems likely given the people who normally might be suspected of making such complaints. But then that profile seems to fall apart into just generally mentally unstable type person in this instance. So anyway, just thought I would put it on the record, and I guess it goes well with the rest of the surveillance agenda for today. All right, well, let's see. Switching gears into something, I guess, entirely unrelated, although we made mention of Trump pardoning people for various infractions, whether it's tampering with their cars or elsewhere. As I said, the ability for, or the possibility that anti-abortion activists could take action under some of these, gaps in the law. They think that this ought to be done, and they are entirely convinced of the rightness of it, and so they take the law into their own hands. Just, I guess, tangentially related, and I mean only in the most superficial way. I happen to see this post on Blue Sky go by from, let's see, Alice Miranda Olstein, I'm not familiar with, but who is a healthcare reporter for Politico, focused on sexual and reproductive health care, including abortion, contraception, and STIs, and it's the abortion issue that comes up here. And let's get back to the one post that I focused on here. Trump pardoned anti-abortion protesters convicted of felonies for blockading and breaking into abortion clinics. One of them just got a 7-figure settlement from the government. Another one of those setup situations in which Trumpy people are somehow convincing Donald Trump's own Department of Justice to settle their cases for multi-million-dollar figures in all of this. All right. This is reported by Fox News, and I wonder whether they'll even get into the manipulation of this. Is this like genuine reporting at Fox News, or is it political, ideological reporting? First on Fox is the headline. Trump DOJ reaches settlement with pro-life protester targeted by Biden administration. There you have your answer. Targeted by Biden administration. Why? Because they broke into an abortion clinic. Are you supposed to be able to break into places? No. Tina Peters can. She's a Republican. These people can. She's a Republican. So, the old adage. It's okay if you're a Republican. Paul Vaughn faced up to 10 years in prison after the FBI raided his home at gunpoint over a Tennessee abortion facility protest that apparently also included breaking and entering. But never mind all that. Christine Parks reports it for Fox News. We'll see briefly what kind of job she does with the topic here. A Christian father of 11, I think you have your answer now, has reached a settlement with the Department of Justice after facing up to 10 years in prison for protesting at a Tennessee abortion clinic in March of 2021. Paul Vaughn, convicted of violating the FACE Act, a federal law that prohibits, quote, threats of force, obstruction, or inflict property damage intended to interfere with reproductive health care services. The 1994 law was used by former President Joe Biden's Justice Department, everybody gets their own Justice Department now, to aggressively prosecute pro-life activists following the overturning of Roe v. Wade in June of 2022, in case you think the fallout from that is over with. 2 days after he was charged, federal agents raided Vaughn's home at gunpoint. That's the way they raid places, according to his attorneys at the Thomas More Society, who are totally honest, and arrested him in front of his wife and children. No. Well, sometimes that's necessary, I guess. Not for Pete Buttigieg, but for this guy. I guess if you actually have committed a crime, they are going to arrest you, and sometimes if you have your children lingering about. But, worse things have happened, like the Christian father who murdered his whole family the other day and then set the house on fire and shot himself. But you know how it is with Christians, I guess. The Biden DOJ also added a felony conspiracy charges carrying up to 10.5 years in prison. Okay. Vaughn pursued legal action against the Justice Department over his prosecution. Why is that? I'm not sure. Does he beat the rap? Doesn't say. He shared first with Fox News Digital that he recently reached a 7-figure settlement with the government agency. Vaughn said the settlement has brought much-needed closure to his family. Oh, he's a snowflake, huh? After living through a traumatic multi-year ordeal stemming from the egregious deeds of the Biden DOJ. Obviously, money doesn't equate justice, and there's not a true sense of justice in the settlement, but it is an acknowledgement of wrong, and it is something to help make up for the time lost, he told Fox News Digital. I guess we skip right over the whole part where there's a trial and he gets convicted of a crime. Vaughn said 7 of his 11 children, ranging in age from 18 months to 18 years, were at home at the time of his arrest. Oh, no, not that. And 3 of his children were basically held at gunpoint by an agent in the yard during the encounter, basically. He added that his 5-year-old continues to express anxiety due to what happened, but I thought they didn't believe in that sort of damages. Anyway, I don't know. At this point, we'll jump back out of the article and just let you know. Fox News is reporting it as justice served. So, wow. Okay. Just thought I'd add that one to the mix. And many more things to go on here. I'm trying to decide what we can spend our closing minutes on most effectively. I do feel like there are at least 2 pressing ones. I'm going to go with the one that Empty Wheel spotted here. And she makes an excellent observation on a story I had queued to tell you anyway. That story from CBS News. Florida Senator Ashley Moody faces renewed scrutiny over her role in Hope, Florida scandal. Jim DeFede, F-E-D-E, maybe Feedy, I'm not sure, but reporting for CBS News, which we don't love, but they've got the story, and I don't know whether it's an exclusive to them, but it is locally based. The local CBS affiliate down in Florida covering this one. Ashley Moody, who you may not realize is an actual U.S. senator from Florida at this point, has been in the United States Senate for 18 months, and yet she remains a bit of an enigma. She doesn't do many interviews outside of the safe confines of conservative media like Fox News. She keeps a low profile on most issues. Great for a senator. And even going back to her years as Florida's Attorney General, she seemed most comfortable standing in the background at press conferences, letting others do the talking. That strategy has been successful. She won 2 statewide elections in 2018 and 2022, and it was her quiet fealty to meatball Ron DeSantis that led to his decision in January of 2025 to appoint her to the Senate to replace Marco Rubio. DeSantis cited several reasons for why he was appointing Moody, arguing she would be tough on immigration and that she was a true law and order stalwart, but he also noted one other. She was also a staunch opponent and helped us defeat Amendments 3 and 4 in the most recent November election, DeSantis said. Amendment 3 was the 2024 constitutional amendment that would have legalized marijuana, and Amendment 4 was the measure to restore abortion rights in the state. How exactly did Moody help? That's where it becomes interesting. Well, that takes us back to the Hope, Florida scandal. Do you remember that one? As Florida Attorney General, it was Moody and her office that approved the diversion of $10 million in taxpayer money to the Hope, Florida Foundation. And the Attorney General did so without placing any of the safeguards or guardrails her office would typically require to make sure the money was properly spent, which is a good thing because, of course, it wasn't properly spent. But nobody got in trouble for it because they weren't looking. That was the arrangement. Those funds were intended to expand Medicaid for children in Florida, but instead they ended up in the bank accounts of a pair of political action committees, one of which was controlled by the governor and his chief of staff, James Utmeyer, and that was money that DeSantis used to defeat Amendment 3. Amendment 3 garnered 56% of the vote in November of 2024, just shy of the 60% now needed to pass. And 2 months after the amendment failed, DeSantis appointed Moody to the United States Senate, and he appointed Utmeyer to replace Moody as Attorney General. The diversion of that $10 million from a Medicaid settlement, some more settlements at use here, into the Hope Florida Foundation, and then into the political action committees fighting Amendment 3, was uncovered through a series of legislative hearings in 2025 in the Florida House, and it prompted one Republican legislator to call it a criminal act. This is a misuse of Medicaid money, Republican State Representative Alex Andrade told CBS Miami in August of 2025. This is money laundering. Following the revelations, the state attorney in Leon County, I'm not certain how they pronounce it there, opened a grand jury investigation. No charges were brought because of the probe, but sources familiar with the case say the grand jury issued a report detailing its findings and concerns. The report is likely highly critical and embarrassing to those involved, and under state law, it was supposed to be released within 15 days of the grand jury issuing it, unless someone named in the report objects and asks for it to be suppressed or portions of it to be redacted. Guess that happened. The fate of the grand jury report is believed to be tied up in secret court proceedings. The Florida Center for Government Accountability is asked to intervene in the case and try and gain access to the report, or at least to be able to argue on behalf of the public why the report should be released. Utmeyer has been asked about Hope, Florida several times, and he refuses to say if he's the one blocking the release of the grand jury report. I don't think anybody cares about this topic any more than the liberal media, he said in April. That's the kind of guy he is. Again, there was a grand jury proceeding under Florida law. The contents thereof are confidential. That's not my choice. That's Florida law. What I can tell you is I have not been indicted. I've not been a suspect or a target. I've not been involved in any criminal activity. Nobody did anything wrong here. He called the entire affair a nothing burger, which, of course, means it's problematic. But he's not the only candidate on the ballot this November who's refusing to provide answers about Hope, Florida. And wasn't that connected, I think, to Casey DeSantis, as I recall? It's a very long article, and we're not going to get to all of it. But I want to make this point. We'll read this bit, and then we'll make Empty Wheel's point. He's not the only candidate on the ballot this November refusing to provide answers about it. The one person who has escaped any real scrutiny about their role in the scandal, though, has been Ashley Moody. CBS Miami tried to interview Moody at a Republican Party event last month, but she said she didn't have time and asked that we schedule something with her staff. A subsequent request for an interview went unanswered by her staff. 3 weeks ago, CBS Miami sent her office and her campaign a series of questions about Hope, Florida, and again, there was no response. What questions did they have to ask? Well, among them are, when her office approved the diversion of the $10 million, did Moody know the money was going to be used for political purposes? Did she ever talk to the governor or anyone on his team about it? Did she think it was appropriate for money intended to expand Medicaid for children to end up in a political campaign instead? In other words, does she agree with Utmeyer that this is all a big nothing burger? That's a good question. CBS Miami also asked if she filed an objection to the release of the grand jury report and if she wanted the grand jury report to be made public. Again, no response. While Moody has remained silent on Hope, Florida, the state's other senator has made his views known. Last year on social media, Rick Scott posted a story about Andrade's hearings and added this comment: millions in taxpayer dollars for poor kids have no business funding political ads. But the public has heard nothing from Moody. And, of course, you might be reminded that Rick Scott himself was a pretty big Medicare fraudster at the time of his first election, too. So I don't know how much what size grain of salt you want to take with his comments. But at least he's saying the right things, even if he doesn't mean it. I also wanted to point out, Empty Wheel makes the comment that this CBS report says that Ashley Moody really did precisely what the entire GOP has accused Tim Walz of doing, diverting that money and using it for political purposes. And they had a whole series of raids on Somali American-owned daycare centers, and Trump, of course, saying they're horrible people and you should deport all of them. They're all fraudsters. All of that going on in Republican accusations against the situation in Minnesota. And yet, somehow, the crack fraud task force has not arrested the GOP nominee for Senate down there in Florida for doing the exact same thing. But, you know, it's okay if you're a Republican.
NetworksRadio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
All right, time for us to hand things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. What's on top of the list today? Let's see. Barron Trump in the news, now suffering a world of hell because of Big Daddy. And I don't know whether Big Daddy here is Donald Trump or Andrew Tate and his associates. Stay tuned and find out. We'll see you tomorrow.